I forgave my wife even when she emptied our savings and left me alone during cancer treatment. My name is Henry Calloway, though almost everyone who has known me longer than a tax season calls me Hank. I was born in a town that never learned how to whisper, machines and men and trains all talking at once. An old mill city that raised boys to work with their hands and measure a day by what you could point to. My father laid brick until his knuckles were shaped like the things he carried. My mother held the rest of us together with a church schedule, chicken soup, and the kind of stubborn patience that keeps quilts from raveling. We were not sentimental people, but we were careful with what we loved. I married Linda when we were both 24. She had a way of seeing ahead 3 steps, like a chess player with a grocery list. I had a rusted pickup and more determination than sense. We started with rentals no one else wanted and a borrowed nail gun that hissed like a snake and jammed at the worst moments. I pulled down rot and put up drywall. Linda sorted invoices at the kitchen table until the napkins smelled like toner. We took late-night calls from landlords who could not find their own meters and from tenants who had slipped on loose carpet. We said yes more often than we should have. The business survived because one of us knew where every dollar went and the other refused to let a bent screw win. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is where you are now. Mark came first. A colicky baby who grew into a boy that could not hide a feeling to save his life. He would stomp when he was happy and stomp when he was angry, and the floorboards had to guess. Our daughter Emily arrived 3 years later as if to balance the scales. She was a careful child who whispered secrets to the dog and lined up her crayons in rainbow order. Our house filled with lunchboxes, broken shoelaces, field trip forms, and the kind of Saturday mornings where the smell of pancakes made everyone call a truce without saying the word. Linda and I were not perfect. The fights we had were about the predictable things: hours, money, and who forgot to pick up whose dry cleaning. Sometimes I would come home dog-tired from a kitchen remodel and find that she had left a stack of statements by my plate. I would say, "Not tonight," and she would say, "If not tonight, when?" Then we would both fall silent and eat with the forks, scraping like small apologies. Still, by most measures, we were the sort of family people point to and say, "They figured it out." Sunday dinners, birthday cakes, vacations that smelled like sunscreen and motel coffee. Mark played baseball until the coach told me kindly that my son liked the dugout more than the diamond. Emily played the clarinet because her best friend did, and then stuck with it because she loved the way breathing in time felt like belonging. I went to every recital, even when the squeaks made my molars press together. When Mark grew into a man, he kept the stomp. He also kept my phone number on speed dial. He fell into and out of jobs like a man testing trampolines. He loved big and spent bigger. I helped because that is what fathers in my family do when they can. Linda helped because she believes that if you hold someone's hand long enough, they eventually stand up straight. We told ourselves it was temporary. We told ourselves we were investing in his good luck arriving on schedule. It is easy to confuse enabling with generosity when love is in the room. Emily moved to Tucson for graduate school and then stayed. She married a nurse who wears kindness like a uniform and gave us twin granddaughters with hair like dandelion fluff. Mark married Nora, a woman who could coax a yard sale into looking like a catalog. They had Sophie and Ben, who made me feel like the world had decided to do something right for once. Sunday dinners turned into a larger table. The children turned the hallway into a racetrack. I put glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling of the guest room because Sophie asked whether the sky ever forgot to show up. By the time I turned 68, the business was modest and honest. I still liked the smell of sawdust because it meant I had done something. I knew which cabinets would sag after 2 years and which shingles would refuse to stay married to a roofline. I had learned to listen to the sound a house makes when it is giving up, and to the sound a family makes when it is trying not to admit it. Cancer did not introduce itself politely. It announced itself like a screen door slamming in wind, a blood panel, then a look on a doctor's face that made the room seem too bright. I nodded through phrases that barely registered: treatment plan, prospects, manage side effects, because all I could feel was the shape of Linda's hand squeezing mine. We went home and put a calendar on the fridge with every appointment written in the neat script she uses for bills and for birthdays. She filled out paperwork that asked me to list the ways I was a person: allergies, medications, faith. I said yes to all the needles. I said yes to the schedule. I said yes because saying no would have been louder than I could stand. I did not say it bravely the first time. I said it like a man whose voice had been stepped on. The day chemo turned my tongue to copper and my bones to sand, I opened the banking app to distract myself and watched the numbers slide to nearly zero. That screen did not know I had held on to the back of a bicycle while my grandson learned to trust his legs. It did not know how many countertops these hands had leveled. It did not care that I made lunches for 4 children every Sunday, cutting the crust because Sophie did not like them and Ben swore the crust made him run slower. Numbers do not care. They only count. Then I found her note under my glasses case on the nightstand. I cannot do this. I am sorry, no signature, no explanation that made breath return to my chest. Her handwriting, the same loops that had written the children's names on gift tags and the dates of dentist appointments, was now a cliff I could not climb. The bed was made on her side in a way it never had been, her sweater missing from the chair, the smell of her shampoo too clean. I set the paper down like it might burn, then picked it up again because I needed to be sure it was real. I am 68. I am a grandfather. I built our small remodeling business from a rusted pickup and a borrowed nail gun. I can still carry sheets of plywood when my knees behave. So it felt ridiculous to be trembling over a phone screen in a chair with an IV in my arm. A nurse adjusted the drip and asked if I wanted a blanket. I said yes, so I would not have to answer the real question in her eyes. Because the answer was that the woman who had kept our books and our birthdays had decided to turn her back on both. The truth is, the account had been Linda's realm for decades. We set it up that way because she was better at order. She liked every receipt to have a home. She saved warranty cards and labeled envelopes and made lists on paper because she did not trust clouds you could not see. I told myself that letting her handle the money was a gift to her strengths. The other truth is that I was relieved not to watch the rise and fall, not to wrestle with the part of being a man that still believes prosperity is a moral scorecard. I had stepped out of that room because I was tired and she was willing. I cannot say I did not know what that choice cost us later. Before everything happened, our family was a structure that looked solid from the sidewalk. We had the right paint, the right porch light, and the right noise on holidays. There were hairline cracks if you knew where to look. Mark would show up with a new plan that required a bridge loan disguised as a fatherly favor. Linda would smooth it with a sigh and a transfer and an argument with me in the pantry about whether tough love is just love that forgot to look at the calendar. Emily would call from Arizona and ask if we were all right, and I would say, "We are fine," because what else would a father say to the child who moved away and carries an extra suitcase of guilt for doing it? We were a structure that had lasted through storms, but we had neglected the load-bearing walls. My illness brought the wind in through the seams. When chemo burned my mouth and made my bones feel hollow, I could still talk myself into a quiet kind of courage by counting what remained. The grandchildren's laughter, the saw in the shop that always started on the second pull, the way Linda hummed when she folded towels. I told myself we would handle this like we handled the bad winters and the slow seasons. Together, with soup and lists and stubbornness. The day I read the note, the togetherness ended. I want to say I was angry first, because anger is an old shoe that fits without thinking. But I was not angry. I was shocked in a way that made me move very slowly, like a man walking through water to pick up a cup he does not want to tip. I was unsure of everything I had taken for granted, our routines, our agreements, my role as a husband who could provide and protect and be the steady rail other hands held. And I was conflicted in the way a man is when the person he has loved longest becomes a stranger whose choices he does not understand. I told myself 1,000 short stories in that chair to make the shock organize. Maybe she had gone to her sister's and the note was the first draft of a longer explanation. Maybe she had emptied the savings because a clerk had typed the wrong number. Maybe the bank app was wrong, the way it is wrong when you try to deposit a check at midnight and the machine tells you to come back when people are awake. But the numbers were stubborn. The note was real. My phone stayed quiet. I did not tell anyone that day. Not Mark, who would have filled the silence with his own panic until I had to comfort him. Not Emily, who would have offered to fly home and then looked at her twins and measured that offer against their dinner and their school schedules and the way small children break routines over a parent's heart. Not the nurse, who saw too many of us learn too many hard things in rooms with comfortable chairs and cheerful posters about surviving. I asked for the blanket because it was the only question I could answer without crying. If you had met me before that moment, you would have seen a man who moves a little stiffly in the morning and loosens as the day finds its rhythm. You would have seen the small rituals. The shop door opened at 8, the radio set to the oldies until midday news, the coffee poured into the same chipped mug because my granddaughter painted a star on it with glitter that still finds my palm. You would have seen a husband who, on good days, remembered to bring home Linda's favorite bran muffins and, on bad days, remembered to apologize when his silence turned heavy. You would have seen a father still believing he could teach an adult son by example, and a grandfather who knows the names of every stuffed animal allowed in the back seat. All of that was still true in the chemo chair. What changed was not the facts of my life, but the angle at which they hit me. The note was a doorway I did not want to walk through. The empty account was a floor that gave way, slow at first, then suddenly. I held the blanket to my chest and tried to breathe in a pattern that would not embarrass me. That was the beginning. Not of the disease. I had already been fighting that in quiet ways, but of the story where a man learns what he stands on when the ground stops cooperating. My origin is simple. I am the son of a bricklayer who married a woman who could turn chaos into a ledger. My family was everything good and everything fragile that a family can be. And on the day the numbers vanished and the note blinked at me like a warning light I had ignored, I started to understand what it would require to keep the pieces that mattered and let the rest break where it needed to. I drove home like the road was an instruction I could follow if I just kept my hands at 10 and 2. The blinker clicked too loud. The late light made the windshield a mirror, and I did not like the face in it. At the house, the key turned the lock with a sound I had heard every evening for decades, and somehow that small cooperation undid me more than the note had. The door swung open to the lemon cleaner Linda favors after doing the floors. The whole place smelled finished, like a hotel room that does not know your name. I put the note on the kitchen table and tried not to touch it again. I failed. I smoothed the paper as if the loops of her handwriting might settle into a different sentence if I pressed hard enough. I checked the corners of the page for some second message written in invisibly small script. I turned it over like a man searching a label for proof the thing he bought is still what he thought it was. The refrigerator hummed. The clock over the stove insisted on its own small mission. The house made all the right domestic noises, and I could not find the noise I needed. Another voice. "Why?" I said to the empty room. It sounded like a cough that lost its nerve. I walked. That is what you do when remembering will not sit still. You move through it. In the hall, the frames hung straight, our children frozen in every version of themselves. Mark in his T-ball uniform, chin up, jersey tucked too tight. Emily in a dress she hated, clutching a stuffed dog that got left on a hotel bed in Iowa and had to be mailed home by a clerk with a kind heart. On the console near the door, the little dish where Linda drops her rings was empty. My stomach flipped. I looked for the rings on the sink ledge, on her pillow, on the bathroom shelf where she keeps the good lotion. Nowhere. The cardigan she always leaves draped over the dining chair was not there. The hairbrush was gone. The robe still hung on the hook because panic does not take everything. It leaves something to make you hope. I opened the pantry because I am a man who mistakes tasks for courage. Flour, sugar, rice in glass jars with labels written in her careful hand. I could almost hear her say, "We need nutmeg," the way she does every year in November, as if it is a surprise the season came back. I sat with the note again, because it was the anchor and the storm. I logged back into the banking app and forced myself to look at what I had refused to see. The numbers told a story in rows and dates and the cold grammar of accounting. For a long time there were no stories, just rent paid, utilities, supplies, the quiet march of a life that balances. Then small withdrawals like a light tapping, 20, 60, 100, irregular, ambiguous. Then a few larger ones with descriptions that meant nothing to me. Then the plunge. It is one thing to be fooled by a stranger. It is another to discover you were the stranger, walking past the open window of your own house without looking in. I stared at those transactions until the screen dimmed. I tapped it awake and stared more. I tried to make them match an explanation that would not scorch my tongue. Medical bills I had forgotten, some insurance shuffle, a bank error that would be corrected if I spoke kindly to a manager. But the money was not lost. It had been moved, line by line, by a human hand that knew the passwords I had agreed not to change because marriage had taught me the wrong lesson about trust. I followed the thread backward, asking questions I should have asked months ago. When did Linda start buying groceries with cash? When did she set her phone face down every evening? When did the line on her forehead stop being about grocery lists and start being about choosing between two bad doors? I wanted to blame the disease because it would be cleaner to blame the thing that can be named and measured. I wanted to absolve her by saying fear makes smart people stupid. I wanted to absolve myself by saying treatment makes strong people soft. All of that might be true, but it was not the truth. The truth was older. It smelled like our habits. We divided the labor of living in a way that made sense until it did not. She ran the accounts because she was tidy with numbers and I was not. I told myself that was respect. Sometimes it was laziness. Sometimes it was a performance of masculinity that lets a man look noble by appearing above the messy parts, while his wife quietly budgets both the money and the worry. She saved warranty cards. I saved the day. Both of us got to feel essential. Both of us got to ignore the rooms we did not enter. And then there was Mark, whose life I financed by degrees of silence. He called it a spot, as in, I am in a spot, which sounds temporary and harmless, like a stain you can scrub out with soap if you catch it in time. I liked being the man with the soap. It made me important without requiring either of us to grow. I can see now how a son learns the shape of a father's love and bangs on it like a vending machine. If I had been him, would I have tested the glass until it cracked? Maybe. Did Linda do this because she could not watch me get smaller by the week? Because the numbers for chemo and scans looked like a staircase with no landing, and she believed falling was inevitable? Did she do it because Mark talked to her in the voice I trained him to use on women? Urgent, certain, promising to handle the scary parts if you hand over the keys? Did she do it to save the grandchildren from a future where their grandfather's fight left them eating the seed corn? Or, and this is the tightest knot, did she do it to save herself from sitting on the blue vinyl chair, counting drips, and smelling antiseptic instead of dinner? All of those lives can exist at once inside a person. I know because they exist inside me. Love and terror share a wall. Pride and shame keep the same hours. I ran the tap and splashed water on my face. The cold shocked the thoughts into a brief order. I took eggs from the refrigerator and cracked 3 into a pan. The shells shattered badly. I fried them anyway and could not swallow a bite. I put the plate in the sink and watched the yolk slide in a yellow ribbon. Hunger was a rumor. Thirst was a chore. I walked to our bedroom, stood at the foot of the bed, and tried to find a version of the day where I had not become a man talking to furniture. Her side of the nightstand was neat. The book she had been reading was gone, but the bookmark was there, a torn envelope with a phone number in her sister's handwriting. The lamp was unplugged, the cord coiled careful as a garden hose. On my dresser, a stack of business cards I meant to sort leaned just enough to annoy a woman more patient than I am. I straightened them because it was something that would obey. In the mirror, I looked like a man who took bad news in pieces. I opened the top drawer to find the old tin where we keep passports and social security cards. Everything was where it belonged. That felt like a kindness and an insult. The marriage was not ransacked. It was catalogued. She had not fled in chaos. She had left in order. I sat on the edge of the bed and thought about the exact last week she was herself. The Tuesday we argued about the dryer vent because the contractor cut it too close to the eaves, and she said I had to stop making perfection a moral crusade. The Thursday she made spaghetti and left the sauce on low too long because Sophie called to ask if a tree can bow, and Linda stood by the sink smiling at the wall, listening. The Saturday morning she brought me coffee in the shower because I had said, as a joke, that it was the only way to get me to drink more water. If a person is making plans to leave, do they bring a man coffee in the shower? Perhaps they do. Perhaps they do it to convince themselves they are still that person. My chest tightened and I sat forward, elbows on knees, the way men sit when they want to look like they are thinking instead of drowning. I put both hands on my thighs and pressed until I could feel my pulse beat against my palms. I asked out loud the question I had not let myself ask. If she had asked me, would I have said yes? If she had said, "Hank, I cannot do this. I cannot be the woman who watches. I cannot pretend this is normal. I need the money moved. I need the plan changed. I need you to let me be weak without punishing me." Would I have said yes? Or would I have stood up taller, pulled out the flag I keep for emergencies, and planted it right between us? I do not know. That is the kind of ignorance a man has to live with if he is going to keep living with himself. The chemo made my mouth taste like pennies. The grief made it taste like dirt. I went back to the kitchen and washed the one plate I had made dirty because it felt like theft to leave work for a woman who had left me a note instead of a conversation. The water ran hot enough to pink my hands. I liked the pain because it stayed where I put it. I took out the trash because the bag was full, and a full bag is a problem. Even a ruined day understands. When I opened the back door, the evening air came in cool and damp. The maple in the yard had started to turn at the edges, a slow reddening that makes you think of heat even as the world cools. I stood there until a moth made the light flutter and I realized it was dark enough for neighbors to see me standing still, an old man in a doorway holding a white trash bag like a flag of a country no one wants to visit. Inside again, I sat at the table and wrote sentences I did not send. Linda, I am afraid. Linda, I am angry. Linda, I am embarrassed. Linda, I am not a saint, and I do not want to be one. Linda, if you told me the truth, I might have forgiven you before you needed forgiveness. I deleted all of them. Words are wood. They burn easy if you are not careful. I opened the calendar on the refrigerator and traced the weeks ahead with my finger. Her handwriting next to every appointment, little arrows for the ones that had to move, circles for the ones marked important as if the word were not redundant. The appointments did not move now just because she had. The body is punctual. It arrives at its weaknesses on time. The phone sat silent. I did not call Mark because I knew what he would do with my panic. Build scaffolding out of it and climb. I did not call Emily because hearing her say, "I will come," would break something, and I did not want anything else broken that night. I did not call anyone. The house and I kept our agreement. It would stand and I would sit. We would see which one gave first. At some point I leaned back and closed my eyes. The quiet thickened. I was not asleep. The kind of not sleep that keeps a man in the hallway of rest, lights on, waiting for a door to open. The note lay under my hand like proof. It could have happened because fear is persuasive and wears the face of people you love. It could have happened because I built a marriage with compartments and then acted surprised when someone disappeared into one. It could have happened because I taught my son that urgency wins and taught my wife that I could live without control. It could have happened because I failed to see that the ledger and the heart were arguing months before my body joined the fight. When I finally stood, my legs felt borrowed. I turned off lights because there is something obscene about brightness when your life is dimmed. In bed, I slept the way men sleep inside a question, shallow, stubborn, waking to old alarms. Morning did not solve anything. It never does. It only made the coffee steam look like permission to keep going. I drank it. I looked at the note one more time, and for the first time since reading it, I moved it from the table to a drawer. I was not hiding it. I was putting it where it belonged, among the papers that marked turning points, birth certificates, a marriage license, the letter from the bank when we paid off the house. Then I put on my boots. I did not know where I was going yet. I only knew I was done waiting for the house to answer. The bank sat 3 blocks from the shop, a brick box with big windows so customers could see their reflections becoming responsible. Inside, the air smelled like printer ink and lemon polish, another room that believed in order. Ruth was at the counter, gray hair pinned back, the same woman who used to slide lollipops to Mark when he could not see over the ledge. "Morning, Hank," she said. "How are you?" "I need statements," I said, because any other answer would knock something off its shelf. She printed quietly, hands moving with the grace of someone who has counted too many people's misfortunes. She slid the stack across, the paper still warm. I took it to the little seating area under the poster about financial wellness that had a picture of a family skipping on a beach, all of them in white. I read each line like it was a diagnosis. There was the same slow tapping of withdrawals I had seen on my phone, the same larger bites, and then the transfer into a joint account I did not recognize. The names on it landed hard. Linda Calloway, Mark Calloway. No trick, no clerical ghost. Just ink and a date and my name absent. Ruth sat down beside me without asking. A soft wait. "If you want to talk to a manager." "I do not," I said. "Not yet." She hesitated, then lowered her voice. "Hank, sometimes people are not wicked. They are scared and clumsy. I know," I said, and that knowledge hurt worse than if she had called anyone a thief. In the parking lot, a young father buckled a toddler into a car seat while the child protested like life had become an outrage. He kissed the top of the boy's head, patient. I watched until my eyes burned because patience has always looked easy from far away. I drove back to the storage unit because I could not stop imagining what else I had not seen. We've rented Unit 217 for overflow cabinets and old invoices for years. I've always had the code. The code light blinked green, indifferent to my heart. Unit 217 rolled up on the same careful life in boxes. I told myself I would touch nothing, and then reached anyway for a banker's box labeled Office, MISC. Inside, a manila folder, clipped receipts, a printout from Summit Realty with my address and a word I had not prepared for, valuation. Paper clipped to it, a note in Linda's handwriting, one word underlined, options. My name was nowhere on that page either. I put everything back exactly as I found it because the one thing I could control was not making more mess. I sat on the concrete floor again and looked at the framed photo I had taken the day before. Me on a ladder at 27, mouth open mid-laugh, the world still making deals with me. I wanted to argue with him. I wanted to tell him where not to step. When I called Mark, I kept my voice level. "Can you come by the shop?" I asked. "I need a second pair of hands on the south door." A beat. "Now?" "Now is good." He said he would, and I stood there in the sawdust and arranged the workbench like a man staging a house for sale. Everything in sight sending the same message. This is a place for work, not for performances. I laid out tools I had taught him to name, spade bit, chalk line, coping saw, and one battered tape measure he always stole from me when he was 10 because he liked the way it snapped back. While I waited, I found myself rehearsing the sentences I would not say. How could you? What did you do? Why did you choose? Those are courtroom questions, and I needed a kitchen table answer. The silence didn't help. It threw my memory against the walls. Mark at 5 laughing when I showed him how to find a stud by tapping. Mark at 16 stomping up the stairs because the world had insulted him. Mark at 28 crying into my shoulder when a job that was supposed to be a ladder turned out to be a trapdoor. I decided my revenge would be long and painful. You would not believe how devastating it would become. His truck pulled in. The music thudded, then cut off. He came in with the walk men get when they are not sure if they should be apologizing or doubling down. He wore a crisp jacket, a watch that made his wrist look delicate. He took in the room, eyes touching everything they had known since he was small, and then he looked at me. "What's up?" he asked, too bright. "South door sticks," I said. "Help me plane it." He stared like I had spoken another language. Then he shrugged, stepped in, picked up the door with me. We did not talk while we took it off its hinges. Work has a way of putting pride in a corner. He held the edge while I set the plane, and for one long minute we fell into the old music. My breath, his breath, the shush of the blade taking curls, the tap of hardware into a tray. I let the quiet do some of my talking. He hates quiet. He fidgets under it, the way he used to under a church sermon. "You know," he said finally, "they make these pre-hung now." Easier. Easier is not always better, I said. Easier keeps people from quitting, he shot back. I set the plane down and looked at him. I went to the bank. He blinked once, the faintest cough of a flinch. "And," he said, "and I have statements." I kept my voice flat, naming a weather report. "I saw the account with your name. I saw the storage unit. I saw a realty printout with my address. You and your mother have been busy." He leaned against the bench like the wood owed him support. "Mom could not." "I know what Mom could not," I said, sharper than I intended. I took a breath. I know about fear. I also know she did not write my name on anything. He looked down at his hands, rubbed his thumb along the edge of the tape measure, as if he wanted to cut himself without leaving a mark. When he spoke, his voice was thick. "You were going to spend it all on treatment," he said. "You were going to grind yourself to dust for a chance to maybe get one more year of shuffling around this shop. You would not let us help you make the call. You would not even let us say the words out loud." "Say which words?" I asked, though I already knew. "That you might die," he said, and the way he swallowed after made me hurt for him, even as I hurt because of him. "That the house would go. That we would end up with nothing to show for all these decades of your work except a box of tools none of us can use the way you can." There it was, his math. I felt it like a draft through a cracked window, cold but honest. "You think my body is a bad investment?" I said quietly. "I think your stubbornness is," he said, just as quiet. I think Mom saw the same thing and panicked. I told her we needed to move fast, before the spiral started. She trusted me. I liked being the one she trusted. He would not look at me when he said it. That told me more than anything else. "Is there a buyer?" I asked. "For the house." "Not yet," he said. "Just evaluation." "Options." We were looking. We. The word throbbed. "Does Emily know?" I asked. He shook his head. "She would have made it a moral thing." We were trying to keep it practical. The plane sat on the bench between us, its mouth open. I could feel the old pull inside me to rescue him from the fallout of his choices, to step between him and the consequence like a shield. I pictured Sophie bowing on a stage made of cardboard and tape. I pictured Ben pedaling away from me, confident because he thought I had him even when I had let go. "Where is your mother?" I asked. He hesitated. The choice moved across his face. the boy and the man arguing. "With Gail," he said finally. "She could not go to her sister's." Too many questions there, I nodded. My hands found work, reattaching the door as if hinges were a philosophy. We set it, tested it. The door swung true, no drag. I felt a small relief, a foolish one, like a man who takes comfort in a level bubble after an earthquake. "Mark," I said, still watching the door, "I am not asking you to defend yourself today. I am asking you to stand beside what you did long enough to see it. Can you do that?" He did not answer immediately. He picked up a curl of wood from the floor, twisted it until it snapped. "You are going to cut me out," he said. Not a question. "I am going to put the money where your children cannot reach it until they are older," I said. "I am going to put the business back behind a lock you do not have. I am going to talk to your mother and decide if the two of us are still something we want to save. And I am going to love you without paying for your mistakes." He blew out a breath the way he did as a boy when a punishment landed but did not crush him. "You always think consequences teach," he muttered. "They do not," I said. "But the absence of them ruins." We stood there, two men who had both tried to be the hero of the same story and failed at different chapters. "Will you come with me to Gail's?" I asked. "You do not have to speak. You can stand there and keep me from saying something I will regret." He looked surprised. Then something in him softened, the tension easing in his jaw. "You still want me there?" "I want my son," I said. "Not the salesman." He nodded, once, twice, as if teaching his body how. We drove in silence. The truck smelled like citrus air freshener and old coffee. At a light, he reached for the radio, then pulled his hand back. I watched his reflection in the window, my face in his face, the same stubborn brow, the same mouth that stumbles over the words, "I am sorry," unless it is saying them to a child. At Gale Street, he cleared his throat. "Dad," he said without turning, "if she asks me to speak for her, I will not." "Good," I said. "Speak for yourself." We pulled to the curb. The house sat polite and square, the kind of place that believes in spare rooms. I killed the engine. My heart kicked once hard against my ribs like it wanted out. I thought of the note, the loops of her handwriting, the word sorry landing without a place to sit. I thought of the years lined up behind us like fence posts, straight until the ground shifts. "Ready?" I asked. "No," he said. "Me neither," I said. "Let us go anyway." Gail, Linda's college friend from church, opened the door before we knocked, like she had been standing there with her ear to the wood. Her smile was polite and worried. Linda stood in the hallway behind her, small in a sweater I knew by touch. She had my face memorized. I could feel it. "Thank you for coming," Gail said. She stepped back. "I will make tea." "We are not staying for tea," I said gently. "We are staying for the truth." We sat at the kitchen table that was not ours. The chairs were too light. They moved when you breathed. Mark stood, hands in his pockets, looking like a defendant who still hoped the judge would remember his birthday. Linda did not reach for me. I did not offer a hand to be refused. "Start at the beginning," I said, "not the easy beginning. The real one." She looked at Mark. He stared at the corner of the table as if he could saw it off with his eyes. "Your second treatment," she said, "the long one." I went to the cafeteria and cried in the line for applesauce. A woman from the billing office found me. She asked if you wanted to talk about costs. I said no because if I said yes, it would mean the number was bigger than love. Her mouth trembled. She steadied it. "I told Mark," she said. "He said we needed options. He said we were going to lose everything if we let this spiral. He said we would protect the children first and then you. He took me to the bank. He had forms. He said I could undo it if it felt wrong. It did not feel wrong. It felt like breathing. My son finally looked at me. You cannot blame her for trusting me, he said. You taught us to trust family. I taught you to tell me when you were drowning, I said, not to move the dock. Gail came back, set a teapot on a trivet, and left again without sitting. Linda watched the steam lift. We started small, Linda said. Groceries. Cash for Mark when a job fell through again. Then a few invoices from your suppliers that he said he would cover so you would not have to think about shortages and delays. Then the transfer. He said if I did not move it that week, we might not have enough to choose our path. He said this way we were choosing, and the house? I asked. Her eyes closed. An evaluation. No listing. Mark said it was smart to know options, my son added. He said it like a password. I took the paper from my pocket, the realty valuation I found in the storage unit, and slid it across to her. Did you know about this? She nodded. Once. Miserable. And this? I took out a second page I had not shown anyone yet. A photocopy Ruth had slipped on top of the statements, a line I had missed on my phone, a new card I did not recognize, a limit that made my teeth hurt, charges to a company I had never heard of, and a restaurant I could afford but would never choose. Linda's shoulders curled. He said I should sign as an emergency user. In case you could not. It was a precaution. He added me as an authorized user, but he kept the physical card. I did not use it. I swear to you, Mark's face went hard. It covered a retainer. For what? I asked. For a deal, he said. A short-term project, a flip. It would have doubled back into the account before you even noticed. I had to move fast. I looked at him, at the clever boy I had raised into a man who believed the world owed him an express lane. You had to move fast because failure likes speed, I said, and because you thought my silence was a permission slip. He flinched. Linda pressed her palm flat on the table as if to steady the wood. Hank, I am sorry, she whispered. I was a coward. I chose motion over courage. I pulled out my phone and set it on the table between us like a center line. We are going to call the bank, I said, on speaker. Mark opened his mouth. I lifted my hand, a gesture he remembered from a lifetime ago. He stopped. Ruth answered on the second ring. Bank of Maple Street, this is Ruth. Ruth, it is Hank. I am here with Linda. We need to freeze a joint account under Linda Calloway and Mark Calloway. Outgoing transfers only. We will come in together to move the funds. Ruth hesitated. She knew the rules. She also knew the people. I can flag it and require in-person authorization from both account holders, she said carefully. Do it, Linda said, her voice small but clear. And the new card, I said. We are disputing charges, I added, and felt the way that sentence lodged in my throat. We will come in. I will be here, Ruth said. I hung up. My hand shook. Not from chemo, from an organ deeper than that. I made my decisions. I started my real revenge, and that was only the start. I had a lot more to do. Mark stared at the phone as if it had betrayed him. You think you can lock me out of everything and still pretend you are the good guy, he said. You think you can keep the business and the house and your pride and make me the thief of breath. I think you can come back from this or keep going where you are walking, I said. I am not building you a bridge. I am building a fence. You can climb it if you want what is on this side. He laughed once, a sound with no center. You do not get to keep everything and throw me scraps of your approval. I am keeping very little, I said. I am keeping what belongs to the children. I am keeping a place at the table for your better self. Linda covered her face. Her rings were absent. Her hands looked unfamiliar without the small clink. Mark, I told you we would stop if it hurt him. It would not have, he said, if we had finished. We all sat in that sentence until it ran out of air. I stood. Get your jacket, I told Linda. We are going to the storage unit. From the doorway, Gail watched Linda reach for a purse that suddenly looked like an apology. At the threshold, Linda turned to Mark. You will not speak for me again, she said, and I could hear her lungs learning a new pattern. If you call, it will be to tell me something true that does not require me to choose you over anyone else. At the unit, the concrete held the day's heat. Linda's hands shook entering the code. We rolled up the door. The neatness had started to look like cruelty. She went straight to a box labeled Linda. Desk. Inside, the dish from our entry table, the one she used for her rings, still empty. A folder of recipes, a padded envelope with our passports, and a thin blue folder I had not noticed before marked in her hand, Plans. She handed it to me. Inside were lists, columns, what ifs. In the margin, if he gets better. If he does not. Underneath those, written softer, as if she had not wanted to hurt the paper. If I break. I read quietly. It was not villainy. It was triage done in the dark. At the bottom of the stack, a single sheet. Agreement. Finder's fee. My son's signature and a broker's, paying him to introduce a seller in Timber Ridge. Me. A date at the top that lined up with my second treatment. Options, I said, but the word came out wrong. He took a fee to sell me my own roof. Linda's voice went ragged. He told me it was standard. He said he would decline it at closing. He said, I know what he said, I cut in. I have been what he says for years. I put the papers back in the folder, slid it under my arm the way a man does when he knows something needs carrying and he is the only one who can. Help me, I said to Linda. With what? She asked. With fighting, I said. Not him. For us. We drove straight to Summit Realty. The bell on the door chimed like a cheerful lie. The receptionist smiled, then recognized my name from the valuation and let the smile fall. One moment, she said. A man in a blue suit with 2 white teeth came out. He started to extend a hand. I did not give him mine. You have a finder's fee contract with my son, I said, for a house that is not for sale. Tear it up. He looked at Linda instead of me. That told me what I needed to know about the kind of men he prefers to do business with. My wife and I are the owners, I said. We are not selling. If anyone calls you using my name, tell them the answer is no, and that you are never to use my son as a doorway to my home again. Linda took a breath. Mark will not be involved, she said. At all. The man glanced between us, calculating. He chose capitulation because it was cheaper. Of course, he said. He opened a drawer, pulled out the document, and slid it across. We will void this. No retention of copies. I will take that, I said, and folded it into the blue folder. Back at the shop, I texted Mark. Come now, bring my keys. He arrived with his jaw set. I was ready for the pitch. He did not bring one. He had seen something in my eyes at Gale's that told him the angle had changed. Keys, I said. He put them in my hand. The weight of them settled in my palm like a verdict and a mercy. Your access to the vendor accounts is removed, I said. Your card is canceled. If you call a client in my name, I will call them back and tell them to hang up. If you come to the shop without asking, I will not open the door. If you want to rebuild, you will start where anyone starts, with a day of work and no promises. He lifted his chin. And Mom? Mom will come home by my terms, I said. Separate accounts. Weekly counseling. We will tell the truth to your sister and to the children. We will apologize without asking for absolution. And we will put you on the other side of a boundary you will not be allowed to decorate. His voice frayed. You are throwing me away. I am putting you down, I said. A thing I should have done sooner so you could learn how to stand. He looked like he might spit out a dozen rehearsed angers. Then he didn't. His mouth opened, closed. He nodded once, twice, some old boy in him counting off, and walked toward the door. Mark, I said. He turned. You will pay back what you took. Not to me, to time with your children, to a job you finish, to a wife who deserves the man you told her you were. He left without slamming anything. That was a new skill. I let myself think of it as the first payment. Linda stood just inside the shop, small and steady. She looked around the room like she was taking inventory of the life she wanted back. "You are different," she said. "No," I said. "I am finally acting like the man I told everyone I was." We went to the bank together. Ruth looked up, surprised and not. We sat side by side, signed forms that felt heavy, moved what could be moved to a place with the grandchildren's names in big letters, and my signature on the lock. Linda removed Mark from the joint account. She did it without theatrics. Her hand shook only once. I put my hand over hers and felt the tremor quiet, like a machine settling. When we came home, the sun had slid low and made the couch look like something worth keeping. Linda went to the bedroom and came back with the ring dish from Gail's, set it in its spot by the door, then placed her rings in it, not on her finger. "Later," she said. "Later," I agreed. I called Emily. I told her everything, without turning any of us into saints or villains. She cried a little and then took a breath that sounded like a decision. "Thank you for telling me," she said. "What do you need?" "Come for dinner Sunday," I said. "Bring the girls." "Your brother might not come. If he does, we will eat. If he does not, we will eat." After I hung up, I stood in the quiet house and waited to see if the walls would hold. They did. My body is tired. The treatments do what they do. But something new has settled in me. A steadiness that does not ask to be admired, only used. I do not feel like a man whose voice has been stepped on. I feel like a man who found it where it fell. And when I think of my grandchildren, Sophie bowing like she invented gratitude, Ben pedaling into his own breath, I know who I am building for. The hammer fell where it needed to. Not to break my son, but to strike true on the nail that finally held. Linda came home in November. We made a list on the kitchen table like we used to. Separate accounts. Counseling every Thursday. No decisions made in a panic. No secrets. We signed our names at the bottom. It was not romance. It was work. It was what we had. The first night back, she set the ring dish by the door and placed her rings in it, not on. "Later," she said. I nodded. We slept like people who do not yet trust the dark. Counseling stripped us down. She said, "I chose motion over courage." I said, "I chose silence over attention." We did not argue with those sentences. We carried them for a week and brought them back lighter. The counselor asked what forgiveness looked like in our house. I said, "Quiet mornings." Linda said, "Shared calendars." We both meant, "Show up." She sat with me at treatment again. No grand gestures. She knit, then put the needles away when I dozed. When the nurse asked if I wanted a blanket, Linda answered before I could. Later in the car, she apologized with no performance in it. I did not make a speech. I put my hand on hers at the red light and felt something steady return. We emptied the storage unit together. She opened a folder labeled Plans and handed it to me. "I will not plan around you again," she said. We took the ring dish, the passports, a few photos, and left the rest behind. The door rattled down and locked. Both of us exhaled. At home we practiced ordinary. Coffee poured before apologies, bills on the table where both of us can see, the lamp on when one of us is out late. She wears her rings some days and leaves them in the dish on others. Both choices are honest. The situation with our son has boundaries and will take time. What belongs to us, this marriage, has rules we honor and a future we tend. I forgave my wife, and she stayed to make the forgiveness true. That is enough, and it is everything.
My grandpa's words really happened. I believe him. If you want more true tales stories like this, hit subscribe.